Hello and welcome to the video. As promised, I'm going to do this video based on Craigslist safety. It's some information I think everybody, especially new, or even if you've used Craigslist a lot, this can help keep you at least a bit safer when conducting any kind of transactions or purchases or sales through Craigslist. Okay, very, very important stuff that I'm going to cover here today, so definitely pay attention now. First, if you're not familiar with Craigslist or what it is, watch my previous video where I kind of cover Craigslist and what it is and how to use it. Okay, and if you're not familiar, like I said, if you're not really familiar, then that's a video that you probably want to watch. But in this video, we're going to talk about safety. Now, there's a few things to take into consideration when you're talking about Craigslist in general. Number one, understand this. Craigslist is a free-to-use service, more or less, that is classified ads. What that means is anyone can put and post, anybody can post an ad, and that ad can have pretty much anything that they want in it. And what that does is that pretty much creates a playground for not only people that are legitimate, actually trying to sell something. I personally have sold several different, many different things on Craigslist, as well as I've bought a lot of things off of Craigslist as well. But understand that with the legitimate buyers and sellers out, or buyers and sellers out there, you also have the flip side of that coin. You've got people who are they have ulterior motives and not good ones. Some people are they'll use Craigslist in order to farm email addresses, personal information. A lot of scams out there. Some are even more sinister than that. Their intentions may be to rob you, or I've heard horror stories about people getting responding to an ad thinking they're going to get something and end up getting raped or murdered, or things of that nature. And I'm not trying to scare you. Like I said, it's a wonderful tool. I use it every day for the most part, and anytime I'm looking for something, I use it. But there's some things that you can do to make sure that you're quite a bit safer. Getting scammed sucks any way you slice it. And unfortunately, there's people out there that are just plain, they're just jerks. And I'm not going to do a how-to video for these jerk-offs that just want to screw around with people. But you do get that. You'll get people that'll put up ads and get people to respond, and they'll be like, oh yeah, well yeah, I'll meet you here in this place at this time. And then you basically, as the buyer, and you've got this now agreement with a potential seller, in order to get an item that you want, something that you want to buy, and you'll have this time and place all set up, and you'll schedule your life around it to make sure that you can be someplace at a specific time. You'll spend not only the time to get there, but the gas to get there, or maybe you have to arrange for a ride. There's all sorts of different things that, and for whatever reason, people do this, and they'll have it all set up, and then they won't even show up. They won't even be there. That kind of stuff does happen. I had that happen a while back. I was trying to buy, I think it was a set of rims, for a car, a project that I was working on, and had it set up where an individual was supposed to meet me, and we were meeting halfway, at a halfway point in between. And I took the time to drive down there, and it was a couple hours away, or a little over an hour away. And I got there and I waited. Now I was running. And to be fair, I was running a little late because of traffic and road construction and stuff like that. And I couldn't get a signal on my cell phone because traveling, and I couldn't send him a message. I tried to send several messages and they didn't come through right away. I don't know what the deal was with it, but I got there and I was only about, I'm going to say I was only about like 10 or 15 minutes, a little bit, 10 or 15 minutes late. And as far as our agreed time, and I got there and I waited and I sent messages, because by the time I got to our meeting point, I had service again. So I was sending messages, didn't get a reply. I waited for 45 minutes after the time I got there, and finally got one back, and they said, well, I was there and you weren't, no, and I left. And I'm like, well, here's what happened. I explained to them that I was late, so they could now say that I was there, or that they were there, and they left. But like I said, I was only 10 or 15 minutes late, and if you're going to drive an hour and a half, you know, hour and a half, whatever, to make a sale, man, you stick around for a little bit. You know, I mean, that's just the way it is. You stick around because otherwise you've wasted your money. They didn't wait very long. If they were there at all, and I don't believe that they were actually there at all, then, you know, they wasted their time and their gas. And they wasted my time and my gas because now I've made this trip, and that kind of stuff will happen, okay, or can happen. And unfortunately, there's no way of really knowing for sure in that capacity. So it's kind of you're taking you're rolling the dice either way. But that's more of an annoyance than really a safety issue, okay? Because your safety's not really in jeopardy if somebody just decides not to show up. They're just jerks. But bad things can happen. So as an example, you know, like I said, I kind of touched on, you know, some of the stories that I've heard. As you know, getting ripped off is one thing that you really have to worry about. So as an example, like if you're wanting to buy a vehicle, and I touched on a box truck a little while back, and I actually do have a personal story regarding safety. So let me go ahead and go down here, and let me show you. It was in the Indianapolis section. I'll actually show you the individual, the listing. It's still in here. And like I said, I was looking for a box truck. So let me type that in here. But anyway, the way it worked is there was a box truck. It was a blue one, which I'm sure is still got to be in here. There it is. It was this individual right here, this truck. And I was looking to potentially purchase this truck. And I got hold of this individual, and we were conversing through text, and had actually worked it out. Because, like I said, this is an old truck, and I didn't want to spend $4,500. Typically, there's going to be room for, you know, wiggle room for negotiation, usually. I say usually, not always, but usually. This person's looking for, you know, a trade, which that's new, because at the time he wasn't. Anyway, but when I was conversing with him, we had come down to an agreed upon price, which is one of the hardest things to do when you're trying to negotiate a deal, is to get it to the point where it's something that you can afford, you're comfortable with, and they're willing to accept it. But we got through that entire process and actually got it worked out. He decided he wanted a cash deal instead of a trade plus cash or whatever, because there's all kinds of different ways to work out deals, and I'm not going to go through, you know, negotiating in this video. But what happened is we had an agreed upon price. Now came the safety issue. For me, and these are kind of what this video is all about, is touching on these safety issues, or the safety, a safe methodology, put it that way, a safe way of doing it. Well, after we had the price worked out, I said, okay, well, if you would, meet me at the Walmart. And what I had done, he kept sending me the address of where the truck was located. And that was great, and that was fine. But what that allowed me to do is look it up on Google Earth, and I found a Walmart close. And I'll touch on why Walmart here in just a sec. But I literally located a super Walmart that was relatively close. It was like less than 5-minute drive from where he lived. And he refused to do it. And we'll get into that here in a minute. Now, why did I want to do Walmart? This goes into safety. Number one, he wanted a cash deal, was willing to accept a cash deal, which means, and it wasn't going to be a small sum of money. It's a substantial amount of money, and it was going to be cash. So in that regard, it was insistent on cash. Okay. All right. Well, that number one should at least raise, you know, like a yellow alert in your head. Okay, if they're insistent on cash only, and are not, if they're not willing to accept a money order, which is certified funds, that is as good as cash. Okay, didn't want it. Cashier's check, didn't want it. Wanted cash. So I'm like, okay, well, you know, that wasn't necessarily a deal killer for me, but now I know I need to be a lot more safe. And there's guidelines like I'm laying out for you that you should follow anyway. So the Walmart. Why the Walmart? Well, Walmart has a lot of people. It's always busy. This would have been on a Sunday. Okay, so Walmart's going to be busy. The parking lots at Walmart's, pretty much any Walmart that you go to is going to have security cameras that cover the entire parking lot. And that in itself, between having people, a lot of people around, and video cameras that is recording everything that's happening in the parking lot, criminals are a lot less likely, if somebody is intent on, trying to rob you or abduct you or something like that. These are things you have to keep in the back of your head. If that's their intent, they are not going to want to be in a place where there's people, because that's all potential witnesses, and video cameras that will record everything that can be used as evidence to not only locate them but also prosecute them. So in that regard, that is one of the best things that you can do as far as a safety tip that I can give you. So number one, conduct it in a public place that has cameras where there's a lot of people. Do it during a period of time. Do it during daylight, and where there's going to be people and cameras. That is hands down, I think, the safest situation you can actually put yourself in to conduct a transaction. And it doesn't matter how much money there is. Now, in this situation, it was going to be a relatively substantial amount. We're talking thousands of dollars in cash. He was insistent on cash. So in that capacity, I don't really feel like that was too much to ask. Look at it from the buyer standpoint. They're carrying cash. The seller now knows, because they were insistent on it, knows that you are carrying cash and a relative amount of money. Okay, so in just the transaction itself is a potentially dangerous situation. You are set up perfectly to get robbed. Okay, so what you have to do is you have to counter that by implementing and only conducting it in a way that is safest for you. Now, here's another tip. Many police stations, police departments, have already kind of set up what they're calling safe zones for Craigslist and stuff like that. A lot of them will actually allow you to do your transaction in the police station lobby, right in there where it's safe. You're not going to get jacked, and nothing's going to happen to you inside a police station. Now, to be fair, a lot of people just have reservations about going to police stations for no other reason than, police, let's face it, police officers, make people nervous. Even if they're not planning on doing anything wrong, it can make you feel kind of uneasy and a little bit on edge, and you might not prefer to do that for whatever reason. And definitely, if you're a criminal and you're planning on doing something bad, you're certainly not going to want to do that, and that'll be out of the question. But the thing is, it's not necessarily, if somebody doesn't want to meet you and do it in a police station, that doesn't necessarily mean they're a criminal. It may just be that they're not real comfortable with that, because again, police officers do make even the most straight-laced people nervous for just for no other reason than they're police officers, and like they're carrying guns. Maybe guns in itself is enough to make a lot of people nervous just being around them. So with that regard, you can do it that way. That is the safest method to do it. Sometimes you can actually set it up where you can call the police station and say, hey, look, I've got a Craigslist transaction that's going over here. You can ask them if a police officer would be present, or if there's one in the area that might be able to stop by for a few minutes while you do this transaction, just to keep an eye out on things. And remember, police officers, they're there to serve and protect the public, and that definitely falls under the protection category. So if they're able to do it, you're going to find out that more often than not, if they can, they absolutely will. And if not, then you can go the other route, which, like I said, make yourself as safe as possible. Do it in a Walmart. Walmarts are great for that because of that reason. A lot of people, and again, cameras. But like I said, this individual here refused to do it. We had the deal worked out as far as a price that we were going to agree upon, and it was unwilling to travel 5 minutes down the road to get paid, to sell his truck and get paid. And now you see, this was probably, well, this says 15 days ago, so this was probably 2 weeks ago. And he's not been able to sell this truck. Why can't he sell this truck? Well, now I'm starting to wonder whether or not it was legitimate to begin with, and whether or not I was being set up to try to get robbed, or whatever. I don't know. Refused to do it. Kept telling me that there was a school, right across the street, and I guess it had apparently forgot that I had the address. So when I looked it up on Google Earth, yeah, there was a school. It wasn't across the street. It was 4 blocks down the road, and it was an elementary school. Now remember, I kind of mentioned this. This was going to be on a Sunday. There's no school on Sunday, not a public elementary school. They don't have school on Sunday, and because of that, and I mentioned that to him because he said, well, we can just meet there. They got, it's a school and they got cameras. Well, I also happen to know, and I'll share this information with you. Not all schools, have cameras. Some will and some don't. The ones that do, and I happen to know this from personal experience, I've installed a lot of closed-circuit TV, which is security cameras, for school corporations, okay? Specifically for school corporations. And some of them have the program when you set it up in the DVR, and I'm not going to get too technical, but they have it set up and programmed in the DVR, which is the recorder, to not run on the weekends. When there's no kids there, there's really very little point in having that system running and recording when there's nothing for it to record. It chews up space on the hard drive that saves the video clips. Okay, so they don't like to do that. So they'll, some will, and I happen to know that it's hit and miss. Some will let it run all the time, and others won't. That they'll actually, program it to not record on the weekends. But regardless, the fact is, I don't know this school. I didn't put the system in there, and I didn't program it. So I didn't know whether or not it would actually run on a Sunday. So when I told the guy, I was like, look, there's not going to be anybody there because it's a Sunday, and there's no school on Sunday. 2, there's no guarantee that those cameras are going to run. So that doesn't fit, my requirements for a safe environment. So like I said, it needs to be at the Walmart because it's only 5 minutes down the road. I can meet you there, and we can get you paid, and everything's good. Here's the other great thing about Walmarts. Most of the super Walmarts that I've ever been into have a money center right up there by the customer service desk, or even at the customer service desk, where you can get money orders made. And they'll pull it right, use your debit card, pull it right out of your checking account. Therefore, you're not walking around with, that kind of literal cash on you. You can get money orders done and have them made. Yeah, you do have to pay a fee to have them made, but, small price to pay for safety. Okay, and at that point in time, like I said, money orders are certified funds. They're just as good as cash. You take them in, and you give it to the guy and or whoever's selling whatever, and that should be more or less, that is cash. Essentially, it's cash. Because then they can then turn around, if they want to, and walk right into that Walmart and cash it. And then they got their cash. But you didn't have to carry the cash around, and they still got paid. So it's convenient for pretty much all parties. Yeah, it's a little less convenient than to hand over, a stack of Benjamins or whatever. But at the same time, again, safety. It's a matter of not doing things necessarily the most convenient way possible, but doing things in a way that is as safe as possible. Okay, so there's that. So when you're doing a meeting or something like, or you're going to buy something, try to do it at like a Walmart or a police department is even better if you can do it that way. But never, 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 never go to somebody's residence. If you can, don't go alone. Take somebody with you. And if you do take somebody with you, have them stay in the vehicle a little ways away, not too close, a little ways away. And if you can, have them, whip out their phone and record everything, on camera. So you got a video clip of the entire transaction. Make sure that if you've got this going on, you do not get out of sight. Okay, here's another thing. When I bought a motorcycle a while back, I actually had to stop an individual. They were, I had a wad of cash, and I also had 4 people in a truck. Okay, that went down there with me. It was just down the road. It wasn't a big deal, so they just rode down there with me. And I said, hey, just hang out over here. Kind of keep your eyes on everything that's happening. If it looks messed up, if it looks funny, something's happening, be ready to jet. Get out of the area. If you have to, call, and call the police or whatever you need to do. Just keep an eye out on what's happening. Um, but and nothing bad happened. When I bought the bike, but I was there and I had this wad of cash on me, and it was actual cash. Wasn't an insane amount of money, but it was still cash. And when I went to do the exchange and I gave him the cash, first you give him the cash, but don't let it out of your sight. Is number one, and that's kind of the issue there, because what can happen is you get a stack of $100 bills or whatever. It's easy enough that if the cash gets out of your sight, to grab a few of them and stick them in your pocket. If you're the seller that just got handed all this money, and you count it out and say, well, this isn't right, and then you give it back to him, and then you say, well, this isn't right, and then it's nothing for them to say. And how do you argue that if you didn't see them sticking in their pocket? The cash needs to stay in your sight at all times. And this is actually what did kind of happen. Is they took it and they were heading inside their house because the guy's wife came out and said, well, I want to be able to count this, and it's a little bit windy out here, and I don't I need a table. And they were going to go inside and count it. And so I looked at them. I said, hey, whoa, hold on a minute. And they turn around, well, what's wrong? I'm like, this is no offense, but that cash does not leave my sight until I have a title and it's signed over to me. I say, if you need to count it, you're welcome to count it. There's two of you. Count them out 100 at a time, hand it to your husband. Or count them out at 1,000 at a time, hand it to your cousin or your husband or whatever. But it cannot leave my sight, for safety's sake. And if you're insistent on it, you can just give me the money back and we'll call it off. Because that's the thing. You have to be safe about it, because you can get scammed and you can get jacked. Don't let the money out of your sight. And they were cool about it afterward, and then they went ahead and counted and did it the way I suggested to them. And I told them the whole time, you try to be pleasant about it. Don't try. There's no need to go out there and be a complete jerk. But I told them, I said, look, it's not personal. But I really don't know you, but I do know that there are bad people in the world. And, you may be perfectly fine with it, but as a rule, that's not going to leave my sight until our transaction's complete and you've completed your side of it. And so they went ahead and they counted it out, and it was okay. Obviously, because I'd counted it 6 or 7 times before. And here's the other thing. Pre-bundle. If you're going to be doing it in cash, pre-bundle your cash. As an example, if you've got, a stack of 20s, then count them out 500. And then stick a rubber band around it, set it off to the side. Count out 500 more, stick out, put it in a rubber band. That's another bundle. And then put a little piece of paper in, write 500 on each of them, so that you know exactly, that what's in there is in there. So that makes it easier for them to count as well, and be able to have it set up, because it's split up for them. You hand them a big wad of cash, it's going to take a little bit of time to count it out, and you're far more likely for them to say, oh, well, this isn't right, or it's short X amount, or whatever, or, whatever the situation is. Have to be very, very careful about that kind of stuff. Before you hand them the cash, look over the title. There's nothing wrong with saying that, if you're buying a vehicle especially, you look over the title, make sure it doesn't have a lien on it, make sure, check everything before you hand money over, because once you do that, and that title gets handed to you and the transaction's done, you're stuck with it. Give you an example. Way back when, before I knew any better, I bought a trailer, and it was a travel trailer, and the title I was given, I didn't pay that close attention to it. But the guy I bought it from, it was in his name, in that his name was listed under the purchasers section, which means it was sold to him by his aunt and uncle. He bought it and never turned the title in. Didn't take it in to register it or anything. And on top of that, they had written over the price. And you're not allowed to make corrections like that. You can't scratch something out on a title and then write in a different number or different information. You can't do that. You can't have mistakes on a title and expect to be able to go register it, at least not in this state. So with that being said, I got stuck with, not really stuck, but it created problems, created issues that I now had to deal with, because the title, while it was original and it was correct, or rather, it was original, and it did go to the trailer. It had an error on it. Like I said, they overwrote the selling price, and it was never turned in. So the guy I actually bought it from technically was not allowed to sell it, and he was in trouble because he didn't turn it in, he didn't title it, and therefore didn't pay the taxes on it. So it created problems. Now I had to get a replacement title, and there was all this that you had to go through, go to the courthouse. It was a BMV that had to tell me, and it was a big mess. And it would not have been a big mess, and I wouldn't have had all those extra hoops to jump through if I had just checked the title first and said, no, you have to get this taken care of first because technically you're not allowed to sell it. And that's again other things that you need to be looking at when you're going to be, especially like with vehicles, or like in that example it was a trailer. It was a travel trailer. But in any case, like I said, this individual here refused to meet me. He threw away the deal 5 minutes down the road. If I'm a seller and I'm trying to get paid, and somebody is insistent on something that is safety related, and I want to get paid, I want to get that item sold, you know what? I'm going to go 5 minutes. It's not really that far out of my way. I'm going to go 5 minutes. I'd even go, an hour, if it's a matter of safety, because I want it sold. You know what I mean? This individual decided, he told me outright, he said, well, I'll just sell it to somebody else, is what he said. And that to me tells me that and this is just my opinion, I don't know for sure. So this guy's probably going to get all bent out of shape because, I'm kind of exposing what happened in what transpired between us, but refused to do it. Wouldn't go 5 minutes down the road to get the sale done. So again, I could have been impatient and been like, okay, well, I'll come to your house and we'll just buy it there. That is the worst thing you can do. When you're, conducting a transaction on Craigslist, don't sacrifice your safety for the sake of convenience or just because you're impatient. Don't do that. That's an easy trap to fall in. Don't fall in it. Stick to your guns. When it comes to safety, do not deviate. Don't accept anything less than a safe situation for you. Because quite frankly, there is nothing that you can buy on Craigslist that is worth a trip to the hospital or a trip to the morgue, or getting robbed. There's nothing worth that. So don't even bother. Risk assessment. Don't sacrifice your safety. Okay. Now that's physical transactions. Okay. Now there's other dangers of Craigslist, and that's scams. There's a lot of people that will go through here, and let me see if I can find some for you. Go back to Indianapolis, because here's a great place for scams. Let's go down through here and let's look at sales, business development, something like that. I've not actually looked through here, but typically, you're probably going to find at least some scams in here. These are sales jobs. Easiest, most fun sales job ever. Just clicking on it. Okay, like here, they're asking for contact information. They're telling you to send your contact information to this phone number, and they want to schedule a meeting. I don't know if this is legitimate or not. I don't. But understand that when you are applying for a job and you do it through Craigslist, when you send them your resume, you're giving them a lot of information about you. Red flags that always pop up is anybody that says, oh, well, we need a fee to process your application, or we need, you see this kind of stuff, and not necessarily through the job stuff, but I actually ran across this once where I was trying to secure a position. I was replying to an ad on Craigslist down in Florida, because I was looking to move to Florida, and the guy was like, well, if you show up here, tomorrow, I'll give you $100 to help with your moving expenses. Here's what I need. I need to run a background check, and I need to do this. Could you send me a copy of your ID, your driver's license, and social security number? Okay. Now this is where it gets a little bit worrisome. There was no way, when I checked them out, after that, I said, well, let me see if I can find it. I'll get back to you. And I was actually talking to them on the phone, and I talked to, they were supposed to be partners, okay, the two guys that ran this business, and I talked to the one guy. He promised me X amount as far as a wage, which would have been pretty decent, not great, not super fantastic, but decent, and would have made it possible for me to make that move. And I would have been okay with that. I was comfortable with relocating. But then later on, his partner, told me that they would only be able to pay me X amount. And I'm like, I don't know about that. And he said, well, you still have to run your background check and all this other kind of stuff. And then asked for my information. And number one, anybody that asks for your social security number, be very careful of. Never give that out over the internet. Okay, it's just not a smart thing to do. This is how identity theft happens. So anybody that asks you for that, tell them, well, I'm willing to do that in person. And if they're not willing to meet you at their office, then it's a scam. They're trying to farm personal information from you is usually my bet. Because if it's a legitimate business that is trying to hire you, for a legitimate job, they're going to have an office. Typically is the way it works. You have to. So if they're not willing to meet you there to do it in person, it in that regard, it's like any other job. You go in there, and when you have to fill out your W-2, you're giving out information, and you have to put trust in that company that they're using it the right way, and they're not, going to screw you. Which I really don't like that entire scenario and setup, but that is the way it is. Now, when you're dealing with something on Craigslist and you're finding stuff over here, they may ask you to fax them, your information, your personal information. That's dangerous. So keep that in mind too. That there are people out here not only looking to rob you of your cash, in for sales, but there may be people out here looking to rob you of your identity, and they want to use your information to open up credit card accounts, or all manner of disaster can happen from it. And you understand, a lot of times all you really need to do that is somebody's name, their phone number, their sex, birth date, social security number, or a driver's license number, any way that, you and I'm sure you've gone through it where they, you're asked to identify yourself, whenever you apply for a credit card or something like that, or open a bank account, you have to identify yourself. Well, they want some kind of identification. Now, if somebody else has your identification, it's never been easier in all of history, that we know of, that to do, and basically take over somebody's ID, because really online, all you really need is that bit of information. If you can get that information, you can do all kinds of really bad stuff, and more or less not be trackable. So keep that in mind. Protect your identity. Never, if there's links or addresses in here, web addresses where they're telling you to go to the specific site and fill stuff out, be wary of that. Check out the company. Make sure that they're legitimate. Check with the Better Business Bureau, or check for any kind of reviews. Angie's List is really good for stuff like that sometimes. You have to do your due diligence, is what I'm saying. Get into a safety mindset, and that will help you out dramatically. So, like I said, I'm sure there's even more safety tips out there, but hopefully, many of the things that I've kind of covered here today in this video will help you out, as far as keeping you as safe as possible when using Craigslist. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and end the video. Thanks a lot for watching. Look for future videos. I'm going to probably do a video showing how to set up an account on Craigslist, how to write an ad, and how to respond to people who are interested, or how to talk to correspond with people that are trying to sell and try to sniff out some of this stuff. I may do some videos later on with other various tips and tricks. One thing that I also definitely want to do is to do a real quick video showing you syntax, which is basically how to use the search bar. Some little tricks that you can use in order to find exactly what you need and filter out a lot of the BS. So with that being said, thanks a lot for watching. Please like, subscribe, definitely share this video with anybody that you know that might be using Craigslist or may be considering to using Craigslist or something like that, because this kind of safety information can really save them, and you'd be doing them a favor. Okay. With that being said, thanks a lot, and we'll see you in future videos.